Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this special session with Dr. Associate Professor Zuleyha Keskin. Welcome, Zuleyha.
Thank you, Dr. Mahsheed, for having me.
Oh, it's really exciting to see. I'm holding your wonderful book in my hand, Your Journey to Inner Peace, One Step at a Time. Before we dive into this, just a little bit of a context. So Associate Professor Zuleyha Keskin, you specialize in Islamic spirituality. You teach Islamic spirituality. What was the motivation behind this book?
Well, what motivated me to write this book is I think I realized at a very young age that we're all yearning for inner peace, including myself. So it was really more a personal journey for me. And we probably want it just as much as we want bread and water, I feel. And we're all yearning for it. And I guess that was what started my, journey into it. But also I realized, that although we're living in a first world country, Australia is considered a first world country like US, Canada and so forth, I didn't see that we were necessarily happier than countries where, there's poverty, potentially war or other challenges. So having material possessions didn't equate necessarily to happiness, and I was intrigued by that.
That's fascinating, isn't it? Because in a world where, we're in a globalized world and we do have people who are in a different corner of the world, not as affluent as we are. They don't have the comforts that we do. So that inner peace, as you said, is so important. And I think I've noticed in the Muslim community, a lot of people, sometimes we suffer from despair. So does this book also talk to that in terms of how do you overcome hopelessness and despair and, achieve that peace internally?
It does. And so the way I've designed it, it's like little snippets. So to me, it's like little snippets or little journeys that will help a person to get to inner peace. So one of them could be like, don't lose hope. Another one might be about how your good actions can have a ripple effect. So it's just little things I felt that in our everyday life that we can do that will contribute to it, because I do believe inner peace is a journey, and that's why I've got Your Journey to Inner Peace. It is a journey, and it's those little things that when you add them bit by bit, it actually contributes to it and it becomes more a part of who you are. So things like despair is definitely included in there, that we shouldn't despair, and I try to highlight why we shouldn't despair. It's also a lot about mindset. So there's a lot of focus on the mindset, how we should look at it. And I try to always focus on Quranic verses and hadith when talking about these topics.
I was going to ask, how have you structured your work? So centered on the Quran and hadith, and then you obviously related. I think I picked one up. The one that came to me was do not put happiness on hold.
Yeah.
So you choose Quranic verses, I noticed, or practicing gratitude and hadith. But obviously, do you share your own story there, or how do you bring in your own reflections in the book?
Yeah, to be honest, each and every one of these, I would say that is related to my own life. I didn't put myself so much in the story like this is what happened to me and then this what happened, because I wanted everyone to include their story in there. But it's things that I've experienced, and these are human experiences that we all have. And therefore, I just thought by sharing, for example, one of them is grief. We all have gone through grief at some point. Then question comes to my mind. I've gone through grief, but also I get the question, well, if you're having a peace, can you have grief? So these are thoughts that come to my mind. Then I thought I'll write about grief, what it means. I've experienced grief. Everyone's experienced grief. And how do we address this? How do we talk about it? So that's kind of been my approach. And then when I do, like if I identify a topic, sometimes it's inspired by a Quranic verse or hadith, and then I'll write to it. And sometimes it's a topic like boundaries. I've got a chapter on boundaries, which has been fascinating for me recently. And I'm like, okay, what does the Seerah say about the boundaries, for example? What does the Quran say about boundaries? So sometimes it could be working that way. But I always try to support it with Quranic verse and hadith when I'm talking about a particular topic, because that's our, go-to sources. Yeah.
You're an associate professor in Islamic studies, and you've been teaching Ihsan for many, many years. And I know, and I've got your other book, it's an academic book on inner peace. What makes this book different to your other book on inner peace?
The other one is, it's a very comprehensive book, as in it's very academic. As you're an academic yourself, you know what that style of writing is. And that serves a particular purpose, because you write it with, referencing, you bring in other scholarly works, other academics' works, and that really enriches it. So it's like this integration, synergy, a synthesis of information. Whereas this one is more like I guess that's more intellectual. And this I feel is more from the heart. And I always say when I wrote this book, I felt like a part of me has gone into it. Probably with the other book, more of my brain cells have gone into it. But with this one, I feel like a part of my heart's gone into it because you write with the heart. So you write about how you feel. You write about how you can make yourself feel better. Both of them have, I would say, Allah or Tawheed at the center of it, but one's more intellectual and one's more heart-focused and spiritual. Mindset, heart set.
I love that mindset, heart set, and I'd love to just get the book just to get into your heart, just to get a taste. But I think it's really enriching to be able to, because I think we all go through these journeys, like you said, and I liked your approach of keeping it universal, but then including your own experience embedded in there, so that it allows the person to go on a journey. Because I think we live in a time where Islamic spirituality, we don't have the traditional tariqas and zawiyas and khanaqas. And so we live in a modern time where, modern Muslims have been cut off from the spiritual nourishment of Islamic spirituality. So I think books like this are guides in a way. Would you call them like the modern day Sufi
One day Sufi
or replacement? Because, and I guess maybe that's the service, a service that it's fulfilling, a gap perhaps.
I did want it to be something that inspires people spiritually. So definitely that's, speaking to their spirit, to their ruh, to their qalb, to their heart, rather than the intellect, rather than the rituals. And it's not no way undermining those rituals that we have in Islam. But I just feel like a lot of the time that spiritual aspect is very much lacking in conversations or in books sometimes. I'm not saying that I'm the only one who wrote about this topic, but I just feel like we need more of this to embed the spirit of Islam into knowledge. And I guess that's what I was in a way trying to do. And it's by identifying everyday things that we can all go through, whether it's isolation, as I said, whether it's grief, whether it's frustration, whether it's, how do you trust that's what came up. How do you trust your affairs to Allah? Tawakkul, that's always, we talk about tawakkul, and there's so many people want to do tawakkul. They want to trust their affairs to Allah, but often they struggle. How do I actually do that? So by reading this, I guess.
Could you give us an example? I think it would be great to just a taster of.
Okay, so tawakkul, or entrusting our affairs to Allah, is based on the realization that no one is more suited to manage our lives than Allah. Recognizing our limitations, we turn to the one who is free from any imperfection or constraint. This trust is not simply a directive to follow, it is a logical and organic outcome of understanding ourselves and knowing Allah. So that's where as an example, I put Allah at the core of it. And, the main point I make with this is you have to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why my first section is about your relationship with Allah. If you know Allah, then you could put your trust in Allah. If Allah is some stranger to you, how do you put your trust? How do you trust your affairs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? But when you realize He's all-knowing, He's all-powerful, He is control of everything, He has power over everything, that shifts the way we view life events, because those life events are no longer random or happening on their own, but they're the all-powerful Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has power over everything, and that makes it easier to, I guess, practice tawakkul. So it's that kind of shifting, I guess, rewiring. Sometimes I say so, rewiring our brain on how we address some of these things.
It's a real training, as you said, as you were speaking. It just gives that visual image that, that knowing God, that marafutullah. It's almost like that binoculars that you need that to see the world. And then therefore, then you can practice tawakkul and these other concepts, the worldview. So it's almost like you're saying you have to know Allah, like subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be part of that equation for these concepts like tawakkul to really manifest, or for you to be able to use them in your life, in spiritual life.
Exactly. That's why in my PhD, my whole sort of theory argument was that we have to have a tawhid-centric worldview. And so everything, has to, at the center of our worldview, has to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's easier said than done. Or you think, we all know it, but we don't do it. It's very hard to apply sometimes. And that's why the more we read it, the more we sort of tackle it from different angles, the more likely we are to be able to do it. And it's like reprogramming our brain, and it does take time. That's why it's a journey. It's not something, I wish it was like those things where you put a USB in and then the whole program, you download, or downloading an app onto your phone or your computer, but it doesn't work that way with our brains. We have to train our brain to think a different way, But at the core of it, it's also our heart. We have to have our heart set so that it is connecting with Allah all the time.
And as you were speaking, I was just reminded of the verse that, we've been created in stages. We're taken from the lowest self, but, from stages to stages, Allah takes us. And maybe that's the whole part of the journey, as your book suggests, that we need to go through these in stages, and we'll be presented with difficulties in life. And it maybe sometimes these are not manifest, some of these difficulties in life. And I suppose different things come up. So grief may not come up for everybody at once.
That's right.
But some of us may be challenged by that, whereas others may be challenged by their health.
Yeah.
It's about navigating through those realities.
It is. And we're all at different stages of our lives. That's why for someone, that's why I like this idea of randomly opening. I don't know why. I think it's fun. But I also think it talks to you. Like when you open something and you read it, you feel like it's talking to you. Whereas when you read a book from left to right, it's very systematic and you're just reading what's there. Whereas when you randomly open, you feel like that's for you. And I guess with these chapters, I feel like some will talk to some people more than others. Like the feeling of isolation. I might not be able to relate to that at the moment, but someone else might. As you said, grief, you might not be able to relate to that, but someone else might. But we'll go through all these really at some point in our lives.
Absolutely.
And so we do, and it's part of our growth. Like it's part of our growth to have these challenges, and how do we get around them? How do we deal with them? And we are going to be tested. We are going to be tested in different ways.
Yeah.
And accepting that and acknowledging that is an important part of, I think, the journey as well.
So I really like the user-friendly nature of the book, that it's, as you said, it's not necessarily linear in the sense where if one day you just want to pick it up, it's okay to be sad. I just pick that up.
Yeah.
So I think they're like nuggets for the day that you can just open your day with and start your day with, and maybe it'll talk to you and cover what you're going through.
Yeah. And on that point, to me, quality over quantity has got its place, but reading something like short, 3 or 4 pages and reflecting on that all day can really help us to internalize that content. Whereas, if I finish this book today, I haven't really had a chance to digest it. I haven't had a chance to think of it as I'm living through the day, going through experiences.
Yeah.
So I think both types of reading is needed, but we do need to have that kind of paused reading, which we sometimes do in halakas where, you might end up reading 1 page, but by the end of it, everyone's really internalized the content that's been provided in their own world, where they've interpreted it based on their own experiences.
And this is a unique approach that you're a professor, you've written in Islamic studies, but you've chosen it's a sadaqah of your knowledge, because you've intentionally chosen this genre in this style to make this knowledge accessible as little nuggets so that people can digest them in their day as they're going through it. So thank you for that approach as well.
Pleasure. I did, as you know, you're an academic as well, Mahsheed. As I said, there's a place for academia, but the access to academic works is limited. Not everyone can relate to it.
Yeah.
And I do think being able to reach out and like something like in a piece, I wrote my PhD on the topic 10, 15 years ago. So it's a topic I've thought about a lot. It's something I've thought about probably every day. And therefore, I feel, I guess, I need to give it sadaqah, and I do need to be able to try at least to give information about how do you achieve that? How do you do that? Can I also make a point?
Yeah.
A lot of the time people think, well, you didn't have a tough life. That's why you're such an advocate of inner peace. Wow. They could have that as well. But, you know, my life, I won't go into all my life, but I have had my fair share of challenges as well.
Maybe not helpful.
Yeah, and not as probably, say, I know in places like Gaza, there's a huge suffering, but we all have our tests.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it could be internal, sometimes it could be external, but we all have our tests. And so some of these ones were when I thought of, or I had written when I went through those. Like one was when my father passed away. You know, one particular chapter I really connect to that. One was when my brother had brain cancer. I really connected it to that. So you do those moments, sad, but they're incredible moments to truly reflect and to get meaning out of that situation.
No, thank you for sharing that, because that just brings us to a whole new dimension of what we feel and what we see in this book, which is, it is your story embedded in this, but it's not, as you said, in that obvious linear fashion. And the suffering, it's not always obvious. So we could go about, you know, there's so many poetry about, you know, people go about smiling, but we don't know what's inside their internal, what's the hal or their state of their inner self or inner world. So we do have this packaged suffering or tests, if you like. And it's almost like, you've put your own journey in here, which is even more,
Yeah, my own journey. And I guess also speaking to a lot of people and seeing what kind of challenges that they're going through. And it's also, I think, informed this book to some degree as well, because I live in Australia. So what do I interact with? I see all types of trauma. I hear about all types of trauma. As you said, traumas that are often not spoken about. It could be from their childhood. It could be currently with their spouse. It could be with their children. It could be with their health. It could be with their parents. And these are all close to home. Like we're talking about immediate family and themselves that are going through hardships. And these have an impact. And on top of that, we live in a global world where we have vicarious trauma, where we're traumatized by things that we're seeing. And so we need to be able to talk to these things and think, what does this mean to me? How do I deal with these challenges and dilemmas? What does my deen, my religion have to say about this? And that's what I should also highlight. Inner peace doesn't mean that you're always happy. Sometimes people say, how do I attain inner peace all the time? It's not about being happy all the time. Because when you look at it, the life of our Prophet ﷺ, he wasn't always happy.
Yeah.
There's a year called Year of Sorrow because he was sad that whole year after his beloved wife Khadijah had died and his uncle Abu Talib died. They had the 3-year sanction. That was a very traumatic time. And it was known as the year of sorrow, the year that his beloved wife and his uncle, who was his protector, passed away. But it's more like, to me, inner peace isn't about removing those emotions like grief and sadness and isolation, but it's more that having Allah in your life so that it makes it easier to go through those events. And also trusting, I should say, not understanding, actually trusting that there is wisdom in everything that happens.
Yeah.
And we may not always see that wisdom. We may see it in the afterlife, but trusting that whatever's happening, Allah's justice will manifest. There is wisdom, and that wisdom will eventually manifest to us in this life, in the next life. So these are the sort of thought processes that go through my mind.
Yeah. Now, this is brilliant because I think that really, like you said, it's not about removing that suffering, that your book is not about that. It's about reconciling with that, as you said. And that's really powerful. It's about coming to acceptance and, having peace despite whatever we go through. And it's not like denying it either.
Exactly.
Acknowledging it and then moving on, because this is the nature of the world, is that there will be suffering.
There will be. If I can finish with an analogy, I think just to help understand what that looks like, because I find analogies are very powerful. To me, it's like, a child that gets hurt and then they run to their mum and the mum embraces them. So that child's still hurt. Like say they've hurt their knee. But the fact that they're in the arms of their mum, they feel secure, they feel loved, they feel safe. So in a way, when we suffer with Allah in our life, it's like that. We can still hurt, but knowing that Allah sees everything, knowing that He loves us, knowing that He is merciful and compassionate. So it's like we're in His embrace, embrace,
Yeah.
in His embrace. Whereas if you don't have Allah, it's like a child who's fallen and then they're just standing there and crying with no support, no one to turn to, no one to show them the love and the compassion that they need at that time. So I think that's a very important part of, how inner peace looks. But also the other aspect is the meaning that we give to life events, in that, when you see suffering happen, as I said, you think there must be wisdom in this, or in the afterlife, these people will be rewarded. If my father passed away and I didn't see him, inshallah, I will see him in the afterlife. Those kind of afterlife is a very, very important part of this journey, belief and conviction in afterlife. So,
There's so much wisdom and meaning already. I'm sure we're all ready to dive into this wonderful book. And tonight you're going to have your book launch here at Sydney, which we're all excited about. So please come along and grab your copy today. Thank you, Associate Professor Zuleyha.